can you tell me what are some foods that can help with inflammation and also can help reduce pain and things like that when people are training?
The more variety there is in your diet, the better. And when I say variety, is having a wide range of fruits and vegetables, which I know it sounds very like almost like an ad on TV like it. But the reason behind that is because every single one of them is adding nutrients.
And welcome to another episode of Soul Wellness. Now, I am so excited because I have an amazing guest with us today, the wonderful Gabby Villa, who is a dietitian, a sports nutritionist, and the founder of Intense Eat Fit. You've got a master's in exercise and health, an accredited sports nutritionist, and have even studied the psychology of eating, weight, and body image. Now, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast because not only do you coach and help endurance athletes, but you are one yourself, which I think is so important because people need to learn from somebody who has walked in their shoes, which I think is very valuable. Now, this podcast isn't just going to be for people who are endurance athletes. If you are, then you'll get a lot out of it, but it's also great for people because we're going to talk about all things nutrition, training, and even mindset, which is my favorite topic. So before we get into the episode, the question that I always ask everyone is, can you tell us about a ritual that you do every single day without fail, Gabby?
Oh, probably to me it's very obvious. There's no single day that I can live without my coffee. That's probably the single ritual. When it comes to when I have it, it's always in the morning, but actually after training. I train really early and I prefer waiting till I finish my training session to go and get my coffee. But yeah, that's something that I love it, especially the Australian coffee. It's just amazing how they prepare it here and makes me really happy.
It really is the best. I noticed when I went to Europe last year, I struggled to get a nice coffee. I feel like we are very spoilt in Australia.
Definitely. And I mean, like, Mexican coffee beans are great, but the way they prepare it over there is still not as good as well, at least to me, it doesn't taste the same. So every time I go home, I miss it.
Yeah. Amazing. Now, you mentioned on your website that you had a toxic relationship with food and you were training to burn off the calories you ate and you were scared to even eat a piece of bread. So can you tell me what changed? Because I think this is such an important topic.
Yeah, happy to do so. So, probably better if talking about it, like how it started and then how it changed. So I've always been, let's say, well, not always, like since I was very little, in my mind, I was always dieting. And it was not just like coming from me. Also, my well-intended parents always try for us to be as healthy as possible. And in their mind, and especially back then, the idea of being healthy is like, we need to follow a diet. So there was always some sort of restriction. I was always amazed whenever I would go to a friend's house and they will have cookies and cakes and sweets in the house. And I'll be like, how can you have all these things in your pantry and not be here the whole day? Like I literally will be obsessed eating all these things. And now I know that the reason my mind was like that is because having that restriction meant that whenever it was available, I would be like without control eating it compulsively.
Yeah.
So of course that was like my early years. Then as I grew older, that was part of my self as well, in terms of always having body image issues, always trying to get a lower weight, always trying to change my physical appearance. And I found a way of, like, my intention was always through exercise and diet. So it was both. I do think that, and now I'm able to recognize as well, that as much as I believe physical activity has been absolutely fantastic for my life, and it's actually being very physically active what took me to be a sports nutritionist and dietitian, I know that back then it was also a very unhealthy relationship that I had with it. But when it comes to food, yes, it was diet after diet. It was looking for method after method. This was before becoming a dietitian, and then during studying dietetics, and even afterwards, I was still struggling. Because even though let's say once I finished my dietetics degree, I still had a good understanding of how things work.
Yeah.
I was still very frustrated with myself, because the thing is that also the way they teach you is pretty much, okay, if you want someone to lose weight, they just need to eat less than what they are burning. And
Yeah.
there are different ways to get that. So like, obviously they teach you how to do it in a way that is sustainable and how to make sure that is as healthy as possible. But because I have been dieting for my whole life, that was no longer working for me. So I
Yeah.
was now trying different approaches and different ways of looking at this. So eventually, and I see like right now, which is pretty much finished my dietetics degree in 2012. So now
Hmm.
we are talking about 11 years later. I am in a very, very different space. I'm definitely way happier with myself, have an amazing relationship with food now. And I think the thing that changed for me the most was actually moving to Australia. And it has nothing to do with the Australian culture or anything like that.
Hmm.
It was more like almost like a starting from scratch for me in terms
Yeah.
of how I was approaching food. When I moved to Australia, I already had, let's say, some behaviors or some things that, even though it was not, let's say, I was following a particular diet, I did have certain things that I was restricting. So, for example, I was not drinking any full cream milk.
Hmm.
I was only eating egg whites. I was avoiding bread. And then I come here as a student, because that's when I came to do my master's degree on a scholarship. So very limited budget. And I go to the shops and I see that for me to eat enough protein from eggs, I will have to buy, let's say, 2 packets of it instead of having a single one
Yeah.
if I were to also eat the yolk. So it's like, well, okay, I better eat the yolk, because otherwise I'm going to be wasting a lot of money by not doing so.
Yeah.
And then go to order a coffee. And I was used to a different type of coffee. Now I'm in love with my cappuccinos. But the way, like, I just didn't enjoy the coffee with almond milk. So I was like, okay, let's try this cappuccino thing and just do it normal. Let me see what it tastes like. And bing, I'm amazing. So it's like, okay, it looks like now I'm drinking full cream milk.
Milk's
And
happy.
yeah, exactly. And then, okay, I need to go to uni and I need an easy lunch to have with me. Well, it makes sense for me to just make a sandwich. And okay, let's start eating bread. And slowly, I started to introduce all these things that I was terrified of, and nothing happened. If anything, I was feeling more satisfied. I was
Yeah.
feeling happier. I was feeling more balanced. And that's when it clicked to me. It's like, okay, all this time I've been afraid of these foods. I've been avoiding them because they would make me gain weight. And if anything, I was feeling way better than ever. So it's like, okay, like this, it looks like all these things and all these layers upon layers of restriction and food things, fears that I had are things that I don't need to be afraid of. And that's when my mindset started to shift quite drastically in terms of, oh, okay, now that I'm eating better, I actually feel with more energy. I'm performing better at my training. I was, let's say, my training sessions, they did increase in duration and intensity, but I was being able to keep going at them and feel way better at them. So that's how the understanding uh, of how seeing food from a different perspective in terms of, oh, you're here to get in my way and I shouldn't be looking at you because you're going to be my enemy,
Yeah.
versus I'm going to embrace you and you are the one giving me the energy, giving me the nutrients that is allowing me to do all these wonderful things that I enjoy. Then let's be friends and let's work together
Yeah.
to make the most out of it.
I think you've really highlighted a couple of key points, which I think is restrictive eating, and also it's reminded me, like, from when my kids were very young, I just do not use the word diet in our house. We don't use the word diet. We talk about healthy eating, making healthy choices, nourishing food for our body, but not diet or restriction, because I have seen what an impact that can have on people. And just as you've described, how that affected your childhood, because you can, parents mean well. I don't think there's any harm in it. And teaching our kids about eating junk food is very, very important. But it's how we use those words, and also, like you said, restricting them. Even I have a type 1 diabetic son, and part of my management with him is not restricting him, because he will go, if I take everything away, then he will not learn himself. And as he becomes an adult, he won't have a great relationship with food. So I'm trying to teach him about, if you do want to eat those foods, then maybe you can take, some other foods with that, a bit of protein, some nuts, really reduce the sugar content. Like, there's different ways of eating foods. But the minute we try and use that word restriction or diet, I think we're already, as you've described, you've found out the right way. Like, you realize quite quickly that that wasn't having a good effect on you. And as you started to relax about the food, you're feeling better, which I think is really important. So why do you think people struggle so much to stick to these like meal plans? Is it because of our lifestyle? Is it because, it's not readily available? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Ooh, I think that there are so many factors around that we need to acknowledge. And probably one of the other things that also changed my perspective a lot was when I came to do my master's degree. My idea of the master's degree was like, oh, it's going to be about exercise and health.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a heavy component on public health. And that opened my eyes incredibly. Because the thing is that by understanding that, yes, we have an individual, but it's an individual who is part of a family, who's part of a society, an environment. There are so many elements influencing our choices that it's very difficult for us to be like, oh, no, like, let's just become robots and this is what you eat, this is how you exercise. And like, very easy, we can say like how many calories you have. And the worst thing is that, let's say, a lot of the people I've seen being successful at having that balance is because they almost isolate themselves. I don't know, I don't go out, I even change my friendships and everything because this is my new way of being. And if they're happy with that's amazing. But we need to understand that when someone is trying to change their behavior, there are so many elements to it, especially the more complex your situation is, the worse it's going to be. And complex, there are so many things, like from economic situation, from access to things as well, from your cultural background. So I think when it comes to, if we were to say, if let's say I even, so the way I work with my clients is let's talk about your situations. How can we develop the best plan for you based on your circumstances? If I have someone who has a lot of control and who has the access and the time and the availability and everything, that plan looks very different to someone who is very busy, like time poor, has a big family with lots of things going on. It's extremely different approaches. And to answer your question, I feel like sometimes for people, it's difficult to adhere to a plan because most people try to go with that one, right? Like with the one that is like, this is the way we all should be eating. Yeah. And unfortunately, it's very difficult for the majority of people anyway. And if on top of that, we add that perhaps there's some restriction attached to it and how our body is responding to that lack of energy, it is not an easy answer, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that we also try to simplify it so much that the individual ends up feeling guilty and that they lack the willpower or the discipline or being or having the motivation, when in reality there are so many things that are changing their ability to implement these changes.
Yeah, that's a really, really good answer. So if someone's wanting to train for an event, perhaps not an ultra endurance one, but for their very first triathlon, what would your suggestions be?
Do you mean nutritionally or in general?
In general. So in general, not just nutritionally, like mindset, habit, on their body, strain, stress, or everything.
Yes. So I would say the very first one is give yourself enough time, especially if it's something like very new for you. So there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm going to do this in a year. Maybe let's say I would suggest at minimum, if you're like, this is the first thing I'm going to try, at minimum 6 months of preparation is what I would recommend. And it doesn't mean that like for 6 months you're training compulsively, but at least you are starting to be aware of, I have this event, I need to be more active, I need to increase my physical activity, my routine, definitely tailor my diet to this increased activity as well. So the first one will be time. The second one is set your expectations accordingly, because sometimes it's, let's say and I'm guilty of this as myself. Like when I started in triathlon, all I could see around was these wonderful videos of people crossing the finish line of an Ironman. And I would be dreaming of that. And if I had decided then to be like, I'm going to be an Ironman, when my experience was almost zero, and perhaps I would have finished that, but it would have been extremely painful because it does require a lot of training, a lot of preparation, all this investment of time as well. So the second one is like, yes, it is important to have a goal, to have that motivation, but know that it is okay to have, let's say, a expectation about it, but also other things about the process itself in terms of I'm going to prepare for this event, and it's how can I make sure that I find the process something that is enjoyable at the same time. When it comes to nutrition, definitely I would say sticking to the basics is at this stage. You're going to be doing your first one. The most important thing is make sure that you're eating enough, that your diet is balanced, that if your body is using more energy, you are adjusting your energy intake to meet that.
Yeah.
Then later, after you have your first experience, we can worry about if you need to have energy gels and sports drinks and a whole strategy and all these things that of course make a huge difference. But there's no point in getting someone overwhelmed with all this information when that solid foundation is still not there. And when it comes to training, I do find, and this is a personal experience, having being part of a, let's say, a club or a community or of a group of people who are following the same objective is incredibly helpful. It's sort of like changing your normal, let's say. If I, let's say, have talk with my friends who are not triathletes, the conversations are very different. They see me as like, oh my God, you are this superhuman or whatever that is. Like, how can you train so much? And then I talk with my group of friends who are triathletes, and I'm probably among the ones who are training the less. So it's like the least. So it changes things, and it's not to feel bad. It's more about like, okay, cool. Like it pulls you forward and it's encouraging. And I always laugh that a lot of the times my social outings are going on a bike ride and stopping at a coffee shop and having our coffee and like chatting over that. And I love it.
Great.
So, and yeah, so that I think those are the great starting points in terms of this is new for you. Having a community that will share with you those lessons that they've gone through is also really helpful.
They are such valuable lessons. So I'm just going to recap. So basically, you set a goal over 6 months. Don't make it too short. Make the goal realistic. So don't go too crazy because you may not continue. Do simple changes with diet. Don't go too crazy with all the supplements and advice. And surround yourself with a group of people who are on a similar journey. Sounds like that is great advice. Great advice, Gabby. So as a podiatrist, I used to see a lot of problems, like people coming in with chronic pain, heel pain, plantar fasciitis, and you'll treat them. And as you start to unravel, and this is why I think holistic healthcare is so important, because I would always identify other things going on, whether it's inflammation in the body, chronic inflammation. I noticed a trend that, food can have a huge impact on this. And obviously you must as well as a nutritionist or dietitian. So can you tell me what are some foods that can help with inflammation and also can help reduce pain and things like that when people are training?
Oh, of course. So I would say, and this is probably very general, but it's true. So the more variety is in your diet, the better. And once again, this comes to access and economic situations, but let's say in an ideal world. And when I say variety, is having a wide range of fruits and vegetables, which I know it sounds very like almost like an ad on TV, like your wide range of fruits and vegetables. But the reason behind that is because every single one of them is adding nutrients in very different capacities. So one is like vitamins and minerals. There's an extra component that a lot of them provide that are called phytonutrients, that we're learning more and more about them. And a lot of these phytonutrients also have anti-inflammatory properties. In terms of foods specific, anything with vitamin E, with omega-3 is going to be really helpful. Vitamin C can help as well, but I'm talking about foods. I'm not talking about like go buy these supplements. Is let's make sure that the foods you're consuming have these properties. So for example, fruits and vegetables will be very high in this, and also fiber is also helpful, and fish oil or like fatty fish, because of the omega-3, is going to be very good to incorporate. And nuts and seeds are also really, really good foods to make sure that they are part of your diet for this. So you mentioned anti-inflammatory, and there was another question.
It's mainly just for pain. So which again, when inflammation's high in the body, I noticed a trend that people would come in with more pain. So it's just trying to work out what are the holistic advice if people are struggling with pain. And I think you've nailed it. Even with seeds, like it's so easy. I'm teaching my kids when they're eating, chuck a little teaspoon of seeds on top, just little things that, from a young age, if we get used to doing them, will become a habit.
Oh, definitely. And the benefit of doing that is that you're not only adding the nutrients is how amazing these foods are now absorbed in your body and how they help balance things. So for example, and this is something I share with everybody. Let's say, oh, I'm going to eat a morning snack. And most people is like, I'm going to have a piece of fruit, and they have an apple or something that is easy to eat. 2 minutes later, they're going to be hungry. And the reason for that is because it absorbs really quickly. If you pair that apple with a small serve of nuts or seeds, it is amazing how like you feel super satisfied. Now you have added more nutrients, and now you are way more comfortable going on with your day and having this balanced energy as part of it. I'm sure with your son,
tip.
I'm sure you're very well aware of this.
Only more recently learned, because I can track the glucose, so I can see what happens, and wow, what a difference. So it's great to, we hear this advice. It's like lots of things, we hear it, but until we know that it actually works and try it, I suppose, we're not going to know for ourselves. But I've definitely seen a difference in that, which is great. So that brings me to my next question, which I think is really important, because we're not only are we living in this real toxic diet culture, and it's good because we're talking about it, which I think is really important, but there's also a ton of supplements. I mean, you just open your phone and you're getting hit with something. So I would love to know, like, are there any supplements, especially for endurance, that you would suggest, and any that you think, and I think I know the answer to this, but what is your idea of food versus supplements?
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of food versus supplements, always is going to be food first, always. And they're like, as the first approach, it doesn't mean food only. That's really important to highlight, because there are circumstances in which food may not be enough or food may not be an option. So however, we always strive for like, let's try and get as much as we can from food. And from there, okay, let's look at what else we can add. So in terms of supplements, especially in the context of working with endurance athletes, there are, let's say, I'm going to say 3 categories. One is going to be performance enhancement, which is probably where most people think, well, no, not really that most people think of, but like a lot of the time, that's their selling point, is like, if you eat this supplement or you have this, you're going to be faster or more efficient or stronger or anything like that. The other category would be as a supplement itself, there's a deficiency that we need to supplement. And the third one would be, let's say, a health benefit, for example, in terms of dealing with injury or anything like that. There's another category that we can introduce in terms of, right now your needs are higher, and perhaps introducing a supplement will be helpful. So in terms of the performance enhancement for endurance athletes, almost the only one will be caffeine. And I always laugh about it, because it's like, there are so many, as you said, there are so many supplements are trying their best at like giving you all these claims, when one of the most accessible and simplest things is actually the only one that works.
Yeah.
Of course, and definitely I'm grateful, because there are products that introduce caffeine that make it easier for endurance athletes to consume it, instead of like having to halfway through your marathon drink your coffee. Well, you have a caffeinated energy gel that definitely makes things way easier. So that will be the top one. There is beetroot juice or nitrates. They have a benefit in endurance. However, the longer you're going for, the less impact they will have. So I would say up to potentially half marathon race, or let's say 2 hours effort, they are still very helpful. But anything beyond, it's almost like it doesn't change anything. And there is some still debate regarding creatine. There's a lot of information recently. Like, this is like, with creatine, we've known for years that is really, really good for power sports, for speed. It definitely is one of those supplements that I will be recommending for someone if I'm working with a rower or a kayaker, or someone who needs that intensity, or a sprinter. Definitely. In the case of endurance, not so much. However, because recently we are seeing that there's also health benefits associated to it, it's like, well, if the body is healthy, then we'll perform better. So that's where it's like, it'll a little bit like, it could be almost like in category 1 or 3, let's say. So those are the top ones in performance. Do you want me to keep going with the other 2 categories as well?
Would you recommend it? So, obviously food first, I think that's a really important key takeaway, because we can get blindsided by all these supplements that they're going to help us and do all these things. But in actual fact, research still suggests that a really healthy diet is the number one priority. So would you really just stick to those ones you're talking about, just the beetroot juice and the creatine? Yeah.
Or the caffeine. Yes. Not just like, I feel like actually and thanks for asking this, because I would say the main disclaimer on any of these ones is when you're having them and how much and the effect they're having. So for example, caffeine, which is that like there is evidence it does improve performance.
Yeah.
However, it depends when you're having it and how much you're having. If you're having too much, instead of improving performance, it will make things worse for you because now you're having palpitations and like it's struggling to concentrate. All like very nasty things that definitely you don't want to have mid-event. If you have it at the wrong time, similar, instead of actually, well, it's not like it's detrimental, but the effect is now not helpful. So that's something that is there. And in the case of the other supplements in general, it's always very important to be aware that in some instances, if you don't have a deficiency, it's likely that that supplement either is a waste or is impacting your body's ability to absorb other nutrients. So let's say the most obvious and classic example would be iron and calcium. So they actually compete with each other to be absorbed. So let's say that you decided that you need a calcium supplement. So you're having your calcium and you're not realizing that your iron now is being impacted because of course that supplement is now is stopping your iron absorption. And similar with others that could be quite like, for example, those, let's say, cocktails, let's say, where they say, oh, we have vitamin A and C and D, like, and all these things that like, it's amazing. But actually, because they are there, like they are all still competing with each other and pretty much you end up just wasting it. And that's almost like a best case scenario. It can be quite scary if someone overdo them. And even at the same, and the other thing to be aware of is that everything is processed by your liver. So even though it's natural and like it's recommended by so and so and like it has all the best claims in the world, your liver is still working through that. And if you are having every single day, you have your cocktail every morning of like all these supplements that you're taking, it's adding a lot of load to your liver, who could be quite comfortably processing the nutrition and the fuel and all the other things that are going to make a huge difference for you.
That is actually really, really important. And I think we could all take a note of that. And I think it's also important, and I say this in all aspects of life, but when we're making changes like that, do it under, you know, the training or under a health professional or a coach. I think that's really important. And obviously, what are your views on stress? So stress on the body, I mean, take me through one of your, you know, routines in the morning, from what you eat to exercise, because you obviously do a lot. I know, obviously after chatting to you before, but tell our listeners, what does a day in the life look like, say for today, for example?
Yeah, happy to share that. And please know that this is like my situation as well. It doesn't mean that this is what everybody should be doing, but yeah, like I'm happy to share an example of what this looks like for me. So today is Friday, and today, I went swimming this morning at 5:30 a.m. So I woke up at 4:45 a.m. I always leave my things ready so that way in the morning I just grab my things and like walk out the door. So while I'm in the car, I'm eating some rice cakes with peanut butter and jam and a banana. That is my, let's say, pre-training snack. And in the things that I grab, there's a container with overnight oats. So I finish my swim and I eat my overnight oats. They have protein powder, oats, milk, and fruit. So I eat that and then I head straight to the gym, where I'm there for probably 1 hour, mostly doing a strength training tailored to endurance. So heavy weights, low repetitions. I finish the gym and then I go get my coffee. I get my coffee and come home. Yeah, definitely. And that's when I have my official breakfast, let's say. So once I get home, I have eggs with some sort of vegetable, either spinach or mushrooms or something like that. My husband cooks breakfast, so every time I get home, it's already there waiting for me. And I have that with 2 tortillas usually. That's my breakfast. Then from there, I get to work, and it's often working on client programs or following up with people, especially on a Friday. Often there's a race on the weekend, so just checking that everybody's okay and there are no issues going on. The afternoon, I spend it with client calls as well. by this time in between, I already had like my lunch, like at around 12:30. Normally my lunch, there's always going to be some sort of protein component, which is going to be either some sort of meat in most cases, so chicken, beef, tuna, or something like that. A form of carbohydrate, either rice, pasta, bread, crackers, or anything like that. And of course, vegetables, salad, cooked veggies, even frozen veggies. Sometimes, like, depending on the day and what I had ready, sometimes it's very much like put up last minute, but it's always making sure that those three things are present. And client calls, having an afternoon snack, the fruit and the nuts. Then dinner time is usually similar to lunch in terms of the three components being present, but it's often like pan fry things, let's say, or we have like a nice salad roll as well.
Beautiful. So I'm noticing a trend that you just have lots of variety and lots of fruit and veggies, which I think is really important, and bolstering that up with protein and other, sounds like healthy food as well. I think it's very key when you're training to have a good program and be organized. I think that is one big part of it. And I think more likely we are, more likely to stick to these plans when we are prepping things, right? So tell me so we were talking about stress on the body. What do you do? Because you do a lot of exercise, as you've showed us. What do you do for your muscles and your joints and everything to help prepare for a lot of these races?
Yeah. So I think, first to mention about stress in general is acknowledging that physical activity is also a form of stress. It is helpful for coping with the stress, but to a certain degree. So that's when it's important to be aware. For example, for me, probably at the moment, I'm in the phase of training where it's getting higher than that I would love to. Let's say I'm at a stage, and I often talk about this with my clients, where there are points in the season for athletes where you are at a point where it's like out of what you would like to see every single day of the year, but they are required in terms of preparation for a race. And I would say, to answer that question in terms of what do you do with your muscles, is acknowledging that those periods are short, like they are not supposed to be there for a very long time. And even in the, let's say, periods, of course, there are days where I like the volume, the intensity, things change. And this is me as someone who has been training for more than 15 years and who has worked with many athletes, and I get to see a wide variety of programs. Of course, with my master's, I did get an understanding of physical activity, but I don't work as a coach. I am not in charge of programming anything, but at least this is my observation. So in terms of what I do for myself is also mindful, especially for the last, since I've been working by myself, the stress also increased, because now I'm responsible for every single thing that every decision I make will have an impact quite, let's say, drastically. So it's okay, now that I'm aware of that, I'm starting to set boundaries as well with my time, with my mind, and being aware that, for example, sleep, especially in this time when the training increased, was something I was not prioritizing per se. I do try to sleep well, but I noticed that I shifted my alarm earlier, but I didn't shift my bedtime earlier. So I was actually restricting my sleep. Yeah. So now I actually have an alarm to go to bed. So it's it's time to go to bed. Yeah. And it's making a big difference as well. It's a simple thing. And it's like, as long as, we can put all the alarms in the world, but the idea is listening to them, right? Like, it's actually, okay, it's bedtime, let's go. Yeah. And it's even the getting out of bed to me, I was a massive snoozer. So what I, this year, and that's probably what decreased my sleep, was that I actually took my alarm, which is my phone, and I put it on the bedroom next door. So I have to get out of bed, because otherwise my husband is going to be extremely cranky with the alarm just going on and on. So it's being aware of those things. It's okay, because I did notice it in myself as well. Is all right, I'm definitely way more I can see that my body is under stress. What are things that I can change to support my body? For example, my week is quite intense in terms of workload, and it probably for the last few years, I've been working every single day. And when I say every single day, it's Saturday and Sunday as well, because I'm making content and all these things. So now it's this year, it's I'm forcing myself. Sunday, you don't touch the computer, you don't touch, making sure that is relaxing, and it's made a huge difference. Also makes me more productive because I have a way less, like a day less that I need to,
Yes.
that I have available. Specifically for my body, I feel like I'm very self aware as well. I have a very conservative approach. Whenever I start noticing that my body is complaining, let's say that I start like I sense some pain or something that is more injury related, I just stop and assess, because this there, as you know, not all injuries are don't do anything, but it's let's see what's going on and what we need to change to address it. So go with my physio and like check what is going on and start putting the contingencies in place to change this. So I feel like that is quite important. I see that in the world of endurance, we are encouraged to push beyond pain and discomfort. And yes, there is a part of it that I believe, for example, the pain of actually I have to go to bed at 8, the pain of I have to wake up at 5, the pain of I have to prepare my meals, I have to show up to training, I have to push through those reps, but not the pain of underfueling, getting injured, making silly choices just for the sake of being under pain. I don't see how that is beneficial.
I completely agree with you. And in my experience as a sports podiatrist, that is what I saw. So the people that would come in with stress fractures, there was signs there so much earlier, but they left it until the very last minute, and then you're out for like 6 to 12 months recovery. So I think what you're saying is so key important, is listening to your body, being mindful of these things. Like, yes, push through the things that are hard, because we all have to do hard things, but not when your body's telling you, hang on a minute, there's pain here, I can feel a niggle. And that's where I'm really big on massage and dry needling and stretching out and using different things to help us as we train, because, you know, there's nothing worse than, you know, being rushed and not cooling down enough, not stretching enough, not doing yoga or Pilates or anything to help us. I think all of those things are really, really key as well. So it sounds like we're on the same page with that. So what would you say? So you were, you know, when I was reading your website, you say you weren't always skinny and you were constantly criticizing your body. How have you found time, or the way that you eat now, to feel comfortable with where you're at? Because I think a lot of people are very critical of themselves, and I think we're heading now towards more of that time where we need to appreciate where we are, eat well, exercise, but also, you know, be happy with where we are, not to criticize.
So if I were to summarize it into words, it would be acceptance and respect. And I would say respect has been massive, because my body, let's say, changed and has changed, and it continues to change. But that's not something that I'm concerned of. It's more like a sign that I see, let's say. So for example, when I mentioned being stressed, I did notice I've been accumulating more fat this year, and it's like, it seems like I'm more stressed because I know that my diet hasn't changed. There's something going on, and it's not like, oh, I'm gaining weight. It's actually my body is responding in an interesting way. Let's see what's going on, and let's see that I'm actually respecting it. So in that sense, it's like, well, actually I'm not, because I'm not sleeping enough. That is not respecting my body. So in terms of respect, I see it as appreciation. In terms of, I love training, I love going outdoors, I love spending time with my friends. And for my body to continue to allow me to do that, needs the nutrition, needs the fueling, it needs the care, it needs for me to decide when it's too much and to slow down. And yes, we see all these, let's say, loving your body, it is important, but I think that respect is even more helpful, because you don't have to love your body to respect it. And there are things that I would say, like, whenever I think of things that I did, especially, for example, when I mentioned that unhealthy relationship with physical activity, it was from a perspective of almost punishment. Like, I hate you and I'm going to push as hard as I can. And it's actually like, well, obviously my body was not responding in a nice way, because the way I was approaching everything was not from that, let's see how we can work together. So I know it is hard. And especially, like I say, especially this year, that I have noticed my body changing after so many years of my weight being stable, and I say weight, even though I don't weigh myself, but my clothes were always the same. I was feeling fine. And it was, especially after that period of like coming here and like everything changed and stayed the same for a few years. And this year that I'm noticing that, ooh, these shorts feel tight. Ooh, I'm going on my run and I can feel like I've never had a thigh gap, but at least like recently I'm feeling how my thighs are rubbing against each other. And my decision then was like, you know what? This is not respecting my body. Wearing these shorts just for the sake of still being this size is not respectful, because when I'm running now, instead of being aware of my breathing and my pace and how I'm feeling, all can think of is like, because my thighs are rubbing against each other, have lots of chafing. It's like, you know what? Yes, I love my shorts because I love coordinating my outfits with collars and things like that. But it's like, I'm going to be wearing these tights, like things that like essentially covering my skin. So that way I'm comfortable. And now I can go and enjoy my run instead of thinking like, oh no, I need to train more and I need to change my body because now I'm having these things. It's like, no, actually, you know what? If I have comfortable clothes, I'm not thinking about it. If I'm sitting and all I can feel is the seams of my jeans just like being there, that's all I'm going to feel like. I have these rolls here. Whereas actually, if I'm wearing comfortable clothes and I shift my attention to the things that matter, it's easier to me has been to go with it. Definitely, there are days where I still feel,
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say that is such a good piece of advice that you've just mentioned. And I think we can all relate to that. I've also felt the changes this year in my own body. And I think changing, going up a size, putting on something comfortable and not trying to force yourself into something that felt comfortable, say even 6 months ago, is more important and key than trying to disrespect your body or feel negative about it, because it just creates this cycle of emotions. So I think that's really good advice.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, like it makes a big difference for sure.
It does. And I think if we all just started doing that, then we'd criticize ourselves less or not compare ourselves to how we were, because we are changing. We're evolving all the time. Our hormones are changing. Our body shape is changing. It's all part of normal life. Now, sorry, before I cut you off, I just wanted to ask about one key thing that I've always noticed with people like yourself who are very driven to succeed in triathlons and half marathons and full marathons, and and even looking at like huge endurance events. A lot of it comes down to mindset. So can you just tell me, because I'm always fascinated about mindset, like what are your rituals and how do you make sure that you use your mind to your advantage?
Yeah, thank you. So I think in my case, one big shift was to focus more on my performance rather than my place, let's say. So often it was this comparison of like, oh, I didn't do well because I placed here, or I didn't do well because I had this time. Actually, it's like, how did I feel? Did I give my all, or what does a good race means to me? Because it doesn't have to be giving it all. Like for some people, is I had fun. I enjoyed the process. I actually didn't have to stop and pant under the swim, like whatever it is for anyone. But deciding what is for you that is ticking those boxes of this was good. And that has been extremely helpful. I am super competitive. I can't say that it's like, oh, now I'm just looking at myself. I still look at those results, but now it's like, hang on, like bring it back to you. Like, what is something that like either you could have done better, or did you actually go through this knowing that that you did everything you could to have the best possible outcome? And in terms of rituals, let's say I have two habits. So for example, when I'm training and racing, especially when I'm very mindful of what I'm doing, I have this like, it's almost, I mean, obviously no one can see it, but I picture myself as if I have a projector on top of my head, where it's like projecting this movie. And in that movie, I see myself doing everything in the best form. So I think to me, it does come to that in terms of, for example, if it's swimming, I see myself like pulling the water and having this smooth rhythm and everything going consistently well. Obviously, just pushing hard, but I don't see myself like like it's actually like everything feels like running perfectly and in control. Then if I'm running, it's very similar. I see myself having this nice cadence and having this nice rhythm, feeling focused. And it's almost like the way I see it is as if someone is recording me right now and is showing it to me. Like if I can see like that projection of what is going on right now. So by doing that, it's like almost like, okay, this is what I'm doing. And obviously I make an effort, right? It's not like one of those TikToks that is like expectations and reality is like totally different. So that's something that has helped me a lot. I feel like, at least in my case, I see it as a mindfulness exercise in terms of being present, being aware of what my body is going through. And I notice that whenever I have that projection and I'm able to, sometimes if I'm very fatigued, it's really hard to pull it or to bring that, and even to remember to do it. Sometimes I finish a race or a hard training session, or like, oh, I should have tried that, and I forgot. But often, like if I get to do that, I notice that my pace changes and I feel very in control. And the other thing that I do is, in the lead up to a big race, like the one that, let's say, I have in my mind that I want to do really well, during that week, I like, before heading to bed, I play the Gladiator theme song, the one where he's walking on the field. And during the length of that song, I'm just visualizing myself doing every single step of that race perfectly. So me setting up my bike in transition, putting my things there, heading to the swim, putting my swim cap on, putting my goggles on, alarm sets off, like going to the water, and like I do essentially my 5-hour triathlon. I can put it in 4 minutes because I go through the whole thing.
Oh, done.
So I find it extremely helpful, because it's like, it's almost saying like going through the steps, and it's like, this is how it's going to go, because I already rehearsed it in my mind.
Yeah. I think that's really powerful. Visualization cannot be understated. Like, it's honestly incredible. And I think you've really tapped into what it really takes with the mindset. So thank you so much for sharing everything today with us, Gabby. You have been incredible. Now, I just have one final question to ask you, because I like to ask everyone who comes on the podcast this question. What are you reading or listening to at the moment? What's inspiring you?
Ooh, I love and I'm very happy that they are back. There's another podcast. It's Maintenance Phase, and they talk about wellness, but with a different perspective, with a lot of the things that we are talking about right now. And I just find them fascinating, because they are very funny, and they do a lot of research in talking about this topic. So, for example, the last one they did was actually, well, they did one on Ozempic, which is obviously a very hot topic.
Very hot topic at the minute.
Yeah, so they've done several things like that, or like also, for example, Dr. Oz and things like that. So that's really helpful. Amazing. And in terms of breathing, I'm still going through a productivity book. It's slowly but surely. I love the approach that Ali Abdaal has in terms of dealing with productivity.
Yes, and he was on a podcast recently that I was listening to of Lewis Howes. He's great.
Yeah, I love him. I find his voice also very soothing. I'm reading the book. I don't have it on audiobook. But I love that it's not your classic, like, make your to-do list and have, like, it's actually from a different perspective. It's like, how can you make sure that you're feeling good with the things that you're doing? And that will increase your productivity, which is great.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Gabby. I've really enjoyed, and I know our listeners will love and get a lot out of you. So where can they find you? Are you on TikTok and Instagram?
Yes, so you can find me on both platforms. Intensive Fit is how you find me on Instagram, and on TikTok is Fuel My Ultra. That's how you find me on. Yes, that's how you can find me on TikTok, and of course Facebook as well. But if you get in touch with that, of course I'll come back to you. But I'm more active on Instagram.
Amazing. And we'll put it all in the show notes, as well as the quiz that Gabby has too. So thank you so much, Gabby. Really appreciate it, and have a lovely weekend.
Thank you, Rachel. You too. I love my time here. Thanks.